Chapter 321. The Red Tower of Magic 2. The moment that he heard those words, the wheels in Eugene's head quickly began to spin. Why had Lovelian suddenly said something like that? What on earth could have made him so certain about Eugene's true identity? There was no way to tell. Genos of the Knights of the Black Lions had been able to discover Eugene's true identity because Genos was exceedingly familiar with Hamel's techniques. Having shown such an understanding and mastery of those techniques that could only have belonged to Hamel himself in front of someone like Genos, it couldn't be helped that Eugene had revealed his identity. However, Lovelian was a different case. Unlike Genos, Lovelian wasn't familiar with Hamel's techniques. Also, Eugene had always been careful with his mannerisms when he was in front of Lovelian. No, it wasn't just Lovelian. With the sole exception of Genos, after having been reincarnated as Eugene Lionheart, he had never once said or done anything that might arouse the suspicion of the people in his vicinity. I really don't feel like that's the truth, Mare muttered to herself inside his cloak, but Eugene didn't feel the slightest bit of embarrassment from thinking something so blatantly false. Sienna, who had been wide-eyed in shock, suddenly blinked. Just like Eugene, the cogs in her head were also spinning quickly. How had Lovelian found out? In fact, that wasn't the most important thing to Sienna. What was important to her was that it was the Red Tower Master in particular who had discovered Eugene's identity. This was the heir to Theodore Thorne, one of the disciples Sienna had accepted so long ago, the head of the magic school that claimed to be the successors to Sienna's inheritance, the master of the Red Tower of Magic and Eugene's magic teacher. A 300-year-old wizard flirting with a young man who is just in his 20s. What would the world think when they saw this? Anissa's cutting words echoed inside Sienna's head. Although Sienna had dismissed Anissa's concerns at the time, saying, "What of it?" In fact, what people said often didn't reflect what was in their hearts. Sienna was well aware of the fact that she was an extremely famous and respected wizard. She felt that it was only natural that she had become an object of admiration and emulation for all future generations of wizards. As such, even if it was just for the sake of preserving the dignity of her title as the wise Sienna, she had made up her mind to be careful of how she treated Eugene when in front of others. In particular, Sienna had reminded herself that she needed to take even more care when in front of the Red Tower Master, since they had so many layers of relationships tying them together. Because Sienna didn't want to show an embarrassing and shameful appearance in front of her direct successors. However, what if the Red Tower Master finds out about everything? Doesn't that mean I no longer need to be so careful? Sienna suddenly came to this conclusion. Without lifting his bowed head, Lovelian carefully examined the situation. Lovelian knew that he was taking a considerable risk with this. The only basis for his suspicion was a hunch. Even so, he had felt certain of the truth, but what if he was wrong? Lovelian thought worriedly. Now that it has come to this, it's not like I can just say that it was a joke. He might still be able to pass it off as if nothing had happened, but Lovelian had to swallow back a gulp of fear. Honestly speaking, Lovelian was afraid of the wise Sienna's personality. Just yesterday, that great wizard had threatened to sink the entire royal palace of Abram beneath the lake and had beaten the Green Tower Master into a mess in front of countless witnesses. Considering the Green Tower Master's pride, it wouldn't be strange if he decided to retreat from the world of magic for the rest of his life, all because of the previous day's incident. Most wizards had slightly twisted personalities. Putting it in extremely polite terms, they were often eccentric, while putting it bluntly, they were ill-tempered, and putting it insultingly, they could all be said to have the temperaments of easily offended nerds. So speculating on the personality of a wizard who had lived for over 300 years, if the fact that it was twisted was taken for granted, just how much more twisted could it have gotten over the years? What if Lady Sienna becomes angry at me for saying such absurd nonsense? Lovelian couldn't help having this thought. If she decided to punish Lovelian for taking out the name of her long-lost comrade to spout off a joke, she might even collapse the entire Red Tower of Magic around him. Cold sweat began to pour down Lovelian's forehead. It would have been great if he had just made a quick follow-up, but now, this silence had already stretched on for far too long. That being said, Lovelian thought it would be too disrespectful of him to raise his head without first obtaining his Grandmaster's permission. Ahem. Sienna was the first to break the silence with a cough. She did nothing to hide the twitching of her cheeks or the upward curve of her lips. Meanwhile, the wheels in Eugene's head were still spinning. No matter how much he thought about it, There seemed to be no clear basis for Lovalian's remarks. So why had the name of Hamildina's dropped from Lovalian's lips so suddenly? Eugene stared at Lovalian with his eyes wide open. Since Lovalian's head was bowed, Eugene couldn't see his expression. However, as his senses had been sharpened due to his training, Eugene could hear the sound of Lovalian's rapidly beating heart. Just how did you find Wyatt? Just when Sienna was about to ask her question with a grin, Eugene let out a loud roar, covering it up. To stop Sienna from saying anything more, Eugene yanked Sienna over to him and clapped his hand over her mouth. Eugene continued in a panic. What? Just what are you saying? Sir Lovalian, no, I mean Master. What was this bastard playing at now? Sienna glanced at Eugene dumbfoundedly. Ignoring Sienna's gaze, Eugene said quickly, You're saying I am Sir Hamil? Huh. Really now, Master, that's too much even for a joke. How could I be Sir Hamil? After all, Sir Hamil already passed away 300 years ago. With one hand, Eugene repeatedly poked a finger into Sienna's side. Sienna, whose mouth was still covered by Eugene's other hand, silently twisted her body as she tried to escape his tickling. I really don't know why you would say such a thing, Master. However, I am definitely not Sir Hamil. After all, Master, didn't you first meet me when I was only 13 and participating in the bloodline continuation ceremony? I am born in Jadal and I am the son of Gerhard Lionheart. I am Eugene Lionheart. I am not Sir Hamil. Eugene tried desperately to convince Lovalian. There was a simple reason why Eugene didn't want to reveal the fact that he was Hamil in front of Lovalian. He had known Lovalian for far too long. Eugene first met Lovalian when he was only 13 years old. At that time he was mixed in with the other children who were participating in the bloodline continuation ceremony. So, not wanting to attract any annoyingly suspicious gazes, Eugene had acted like a child. He had played with the 13-year-old Cyan and Seal, and he had even hung out with Garjith, who even back then was an idiot, and Desra. Eugene had always acted in a manner befitting of a supposed 13-year-old. This was on the day before the bloodline continuation ceremony when he had first shared a meal with Lovalian, and also on the very day of the bloodline continuation ceremony itself. This meant that when the other children were watching with sparkling eyes during Lovalian's presentation and display of magic, he had done the same. If it was revealed that all of that was a lie and that he, a hero from 300 years ago, was deliberately pretending to be a child, and was actually playing around with the other kids. From beating up the 13-year-old Cyan to proudly showing off his strength in front of the other children during the bloodline continuation ceremony, then there were the times when Eugene had been asked, which of the heroes from 300 years ago did he most respect? Whenever Eugene had received such a question, he had always said, "It's Sir Hamil," without any hesitation. I'm just saying this because you don't know any better, but Sir Hamil is definitely not an idiot like that Death Knight. Sir Hamil wasn't someone so shallow that he would curse his comrades just because of the contents of a fairy tale. There was no way. Whether it was in front of Lovalian or anyone else who had known him from a young age, Eugene definitely couldn't bear to reveal his true identity. Eugene's voice and expression were so desperate that Sienna also decided to back down for now. She escaped Eugene's grasp and loudly cleared her throat. Ahem, my successor is correct. Hamil, well, he already died a long time ago. He died in a particularly stupid fashion at that. It was a heroic death, Eugene tried to correct her. Sienna argued, how is throwing himself into the path of danger while in a situation where he really didn't need to die a heroic death? Sir Hamil sacrificed himself for the sake of his comrades, Eugene insisted. Sienna frowned. It seems that suicide is actually called sacrifice in this day and age? Eugene's eyebrows rose as he was forced to listen to Sienna's mockery. If only they weren't in front of Lovalian, he would definitely break her out of this bad habit of hers. But for now, the only thing that Eugene could do was glare at Sienna as his shoulders shook with suppressed anger. Eugene reluctantly responded, even if the death was a suicide. If you say such a thing, Lady Sienna, then I'm sure that Sir Hamil will be sad in the afterlife. Sienna waved it off. No way, it's fine for me to say such a thing. I was Hamil's friend after all, and also Hamil, didn't he say that he loved me? So that's why it's fine for me to say such things. Even though she was just saying this to make fun of him, after Sienna finished speaking, it was her face instead of his that ended up blushing. While glaring into Sienna's face, Eugene snorted, Did Sir Hamil really love Lady Sienna? I've also read the fairy tale a few times, but How should I say this? It feels like the author put in too much of their personal feelings. Sienna snapped. Hey, what do you know? Also how dare you say that Hamel didn't love me? Do you really mean that? Eugene hesitated. No, well, I'm not Sir Hamel, but even so, as Sir Hamel's successor and his many times distant junior, I don't really feel like Sir Hamel would confess that he loved Lady Sienna with his last words on his deathbed. Well, at least that's just my opinion on it. Sienna and Eugene's glares clashed in mid-air. Even at this moment, Lovelace still kept his head bowed in silence. Belatedly noticing this, Sienna cleared her throat once more and turned to Lovelace to say, You may raise your head, Red Tower Master. Having finally received his Grandmaster's permission, Lovelace slowly raised his head, only to reveal that there wasn't even a trace of the earlier nervousness on his face. Instead, Lovelace's eyes appeared victorious, as if he had confirmed the truth, and his expression was peaceful and calm. Hi, thanks, Lovelace said politely. His suspicions had solidified into certainty. Even though Eugene had burst out with denials, through the series of conversations that followed, Lovelace had confirmed that Eugene's real identity was that of Hamel Dynaz, the hero from 300 years ago. Otherwise, everything would cease to make sense. Allow me to show you inside, Lovelace said as he turned around, luxuriating in the relief now coursing through him. As Lovelace walked off with a light step, Eugene followed behind with a confused expression. Hesitantly, Eugene called out, Sir Lovelace Master? You do understand what I was trying to tell you, right? Without turning back, Lovelace replied, You don't need to be so polite, Sir Hamel. No, I mean Sir Eugene. But it seems like you haven't gotten the point, though. I'm telling you I'm not Sir Hamel, Eugene stubbornly insisted. My apologies. It seems that I unintentionally made a slip of the tongue. I will be sure to be more careful from now on, Lovelace promised. Eugene must have a good reason for refusing to reveal his true identity. Right away, Lovelace could think of several reasons why that might be. Most likely, he was worried about the threat posed by Helmuth's demon kings and demon folks. Even after hundreds of years had passed and he was reincarnated in this era, that great hero still seemed to be pursuing the long-cherished wish that he hadn't been able to fulfill during his previous life. Lovelace realized, come to think of it, ever since he was young, Sir Eugene has always hated black magic and demon folks. This had been unusual to see in a child of this era, but Lovelace had thought it wasn't that strange for a child of that Lionheart clan to hate black magic and demon folk. However, as the reincarnation of the stupid Hamel, Eugene would naturally have no choice but to hate the fact that the demon folk still remained alive in this era. The more he thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces inside Lovelace's head seemed to come together. As for Eugene's excessive admiration of the Sutpid Hamel, well, Lovelace thought that was also a natural consequence. From Lovelace's perspective, if he were to be called the stupid Lovelace 300 years after he had died, he felt he would also be furious and desperate to somehow defend himself. Of course, he didn't think he would be as blatant about it as Eugene, but... You came to visit us so suddenly, so I'm afraid that we weren't able to prepare a proper welcome for you, Lovelace apologized. It's fine. I don't really enjoy it when it gets too noisy in any case, Sienna said as she plopped down on a sofa. Lovelace politely sat down in front of her and then turned to look at Eugene. Eugene still had an uncertain expression on his face. Sienna reminded him, My heir, what are you doing? Hurry up and sit down next to me. All right, Eugene said as he sat down next to Sienna as instructed. This sight caused Lovelace to show a bright smile. Witnessing in person the reunion of a couple that had been separated for hundreds of years, Lovelace, who had never once been in love with anyone, felt as if a flower was blooming in the desolate wasteland of his heart. This is quite the beautiful sight, Lovelace commented. You're talking about our master-student relationship, right? Eugene asked uncomfortably. Lovelace hesitated. Yes, well, that's right. Eugene's expression crumpled as he forcefully turned his gaze away. Noticing how the atmosphere of the room had changed, Sienna donned a whimsical smile. Even in this situation, Sienna felt a deep sense of amusement. Sienna changed the subject. We weren't in a good mood yesterday, so it seems that we couldn't have a proper conversation with you, no? So anyways, you're Theodore Thorne's successor. You are indeed my former master's master, Lovelace confirmed. Sienna sneered, that cheeky Green Tower master. I definitely don't want to recognize that Osmond guy as one of my successors. According to what I've heard from this cute successor sitting next to me, you, the Red Tower Master and the White Tower Master were of great help during my rescue. Not only that, I've also heard a lot about you from Mare. She said that you've always shown her special attention. Is that right? I haven't done anything impressive enough to deserve such praise, Lovelian deflected. As one of Aratha's Tower Masters, I've always had to stand in a neutral position, and it was impossible for me to take Mare, who was bound to witchcraft, away from Akron. However, you did pay attention to her. I've heard that you always made sure to politely greet Mare whenever you visited Akron, and that wasn't nothing, now was it? Sienna said as she rested her hands in her lap. Without any of her previous playfulness, she stared at Lovelian with a serious look in her eyes. I might not be able to properly reveal the full details to Arath, but you, the Red Tower Master, know a bit about why I was forced to go into seclusion. That unexpected seclusion left Mare in a depressing state. Since you showed Mare even the slightest bit of care when she was in dire straits, I should also show you the same level of friendship. Lovelian shook with suppressed emotion. He had never imagined that he would actually hear something like that from the wise Sienna. Sienna added, not only that, but you also took very good care of my heir, Eugene Lionheart. The fact that Eugene was able to grow into a proper wizard is all because of your teaching and care. Lovelian was overwhelmed. I have never truly been all that great of a teacher for Sir Eugene. Even if it wasn't me, any other wizard who first met Sir Eugene would surely have been eager to take him in as their disciple. I don't think that matters all that much. Red Tower Master, my successor has recognized you as his master, and you have treated my successor as your disciple. You taught him magic, advised him on any problems he might have, and assisted him in his goals. And in the end, you became someone my successor trusted enough to ask for help when he was attempting to rescue me. Although there are a lot of people who have been drawn to my successor, leaving him far from on his own, you, Red Tower Master, have become a special and strong presence even among all of them, Sienna assured him as she stretched her hand to one side. Fwoosh! A magic staff covered in a white light frost appeared in Sienna's hand. Theodore Thorne's successor, the master of the Red Tower of Magic, Lovelian Sophies. I, Sienna Meridian, do recognize you as one of my heirs. I will also stake my name and reputation behind the Red Tower of Magic by officially sponsoring it, Sienna formally announced. Light bloomed from the tip of Frost. Whyup! Strands of white, magical light flew over to one corner of Lovelian's room and wound around each other to form a sphere. Upon seeing this sphere, Lovelian unconsciously leaped up from his seat. Lovelian gasped, Witchcraft. A copy that appeared identical to the first volume of Witchcraft that was stored on the uppermost floor of Akron, within Sienna's hall, had just been freshly created inside Lovelian's office. Though it wasn't completely identical. Instead, this version of Witchcraft was slightly smaller than the one in Akron. It doesn't just hold the formulas behind the eternal whole. I've also stored within it some of the other magic that I use, Sienna informed him. Just like the Witchcraft in Akron, it would be impossible to try and understand its contents after only a few attempts. However, if a desperate and exceptionally talented wizard were willing to devote himself to examining it dozens or even hundreds of times, they would definitely be able to surpass their own limits. To tell you the truth, Akron's Witchcraft isn't actually incomplete. It wasn't even divided into 3 actual volumes in the first place. Witchcraft was solely created so that future generations of wizards would be able to access the papers for the eternal whole. However, I can assure you, I am much greater than I was when I first created Witchcraft. So this Witchcraft is a better and more complete version than the Witchcraft sealed within Akron. Sienna grinned as she lowered Frost and continued, I will donate this Witchcraft to the Red Tower of Magic. Whether you wish to make it your sole focus of study or choose to use it as a different perspective for your personal research, I leave this to you, the current Red Tower Master, and all future generations of Red Tower Masters. Thank you so much. Lovelian stammered as he bowed his head while crying. Sienna wasn't done just yet. Also, I may have acknowledged you as one of my heirs. You don't need to call me your Grandmaster or even Master. Just call me Lady Sienna. Got it? Lovelian nodded. Yes, understood. Sienna turned away from Lovelian. As for my successor, Eugene. It's all right if you want to call me Master. But don't call me Grandmaster. Eugene asked, what exactly is the difference between the two? because Grandmaster makes me sound a bit older than Master. Sienna complained. So what? Eugene snorted. I'm supposed to call Sir Lovelian my master, who in turn calls you Lady Sienna despite acknowledging you as his master. But you ask me to call you master as well? Just why do you have to put it in such a complex and irritating way? You can just address the Red Tower Master and me as your master. It should be okay, right? Or else. Is this just because you also want to call me Lady Sienna? Sienna asked, her lips twitching as she tried to stop herself from smiling. That way of addressing her also seemed pretty satisfactory to Sienna. However, Eugene just shook his head in exasperation. Fine, I'll call you Lady Sienna, Eugene agreed. Lovelian chimed in. Sir Eugene, there's no need to address me as master. In fact, up until now, apart from when you were asking for me for something or were feeling apologetic for some reason, you have never once called me master. So just feel free to address me more casually. Eugene nodded. All right, Sir Lovelian. Eugene managed to avoid the slip of the tongue that Lovelian had been waiting for. Sienna hesitated. Also, there's still the White Tower Master, right? Her name is... It's Melkith Elhaya. Big C. Theus. Melkith cried out through the office window. Sobbing, Melkith rubbed her face against the tightly closed window as if trying to squeeze through it. Melkith had actually been waiting outside of the window since earlier. She had been hoping to somehow sneak inside, but because Lovelian's magical barrier was so sturdy, Melkith hadn't been able to get through it, so she had just kept rubbing her face against the window like she was now. Sienna hesitantly observed, she doesn't seem to have any of the dignity of a tower master, let alone an arch-wizard. Lovelian sighed. Lady Sienna, please don't judge the characters of the other wizards of this era by what you might see from the White Tower Master. In return for being born with overflowing talent, the White Tower Master has a lot of flaws in her character. She also has a habit of eavesdropping, Eugene added as he nodded in support of Lovelian's words. With an uncertain expression, Sienna flicked a finger at the window. At this gesture, the window was thrown open, and as if she had been waiting for this, Melkith somersaulted into the room. Lady Sienna, big sis. Melkith shouted flatteringly. I also did my best to save you, sis. I've also done a lot to take care of big sis, cherished heir Eugene. In fact, the cloak he's wearing right now, which he wears everywhere he goes, every single day for the past few years, actually belongs to me. Did you give him that cloak as a gift? Sienna asked as her eyes narrowed dangerously. A black flame of jealousy flickered into life deep within Sienna's heart. Eugene shook his head. It's not a present. We made a bet and after I won I took it from her. I haven't really given it to you, Melkith refuted. I'm just lending it. Do you know how many years you have left? When you were 17 I agreed to lend it to you for 9 years, so there are only 5 years left. Wasn't the time extended at all during the past few years? Eugene reminded her. As far I know, I've given you all sorts of help, Lady Melkith. Who knows? I don't remember any of that, Melkith scoffed. If you have a contract that says so, then bring it right here. You don't have one, do you? You can't trust verbal contracts, because neither you nor I, and not even God, knows whether or not you or I might be lying about something. In any case, you only have 5 years left. After unleashing that torrent of words, Melkith crawled up to Sienna on her knees. Big sis, I also have a whole lot of respect for you. If it wasn't for you, the world's greatest wizard, I wouldn't have become a wizard myself, Melkith said flatteringly. Eugene ruthlessly exposed her. Lady Sienna, that's a lie. From what the White Tower Master has told me, she became a wizard not because of you, Lady Sienna, but because she respected Sir Vermouth. I respect them both. Melkith shouted. And I love you, big sis. There's still a difference between respect and love, right? So because I love you, can't you please give me one of those WWH crafts as well? Please. Sienna looked between Eugene and Melkith with narrowed eyes. So this was the White Tower Master, Melkith Elhaya. From what she had heard from Eugene, she was an outrageous spirit summoner who had managed to make contracts with 3 spirit kings. But why do they look so friendly? Sienna thought suspiciously. There didn't seem to be any of the normal feelings that might exist between a man and a woman, but even so, Sienna didn't really like Melkith, so... No, I don't want to, Sienna forcefully declared. White Tower Master, Melkith Elhaya, I'm aware that you have given a lot of help to my successor and that you also contributed to my rescue. Even so, I cannot give you a copy of witchcraft. After all, you're not one of my successors. Big Sis. Melkith whined. Sienna sniffed. I'll permit you to call me Big Sis. But nothing more than that. Please. Melkith grabbed onto Sienna's leg and begged. As her face crumpled into a scowl, Sienna glared down at Melkith. Is this, truly, the greatest and most powerful spirit summoner of this era, no, of all eras? 300 years ago, during that age of war, spirit summoners who had managed to contract one of the spirit kings were rare. Even when you looked throughout all of the ages, there was no other spirit summoner who had managed to contract multiple spirit kings. But was this really that one-of-kind spirit summoner? Completely unable to believe this, Sienna's body shuddered in disgust. See that, Hamel? Tempest shouted inside Eugene's head. I'm not the one who's wrong. It's the spirit kings of lightning, earth, and fire who are wrong. Just look at Sienna's expression. If you're a wizard, if you're a human, if you're any sort of being with intelligence, you wouldn't be able to do anything other than despise Melkith Al-Haya's very existence. Tiske. Eugene felt the same way, so he couldn't really say anything in response to Tempest. But deep down he thought he would someday like to see Tempest, who was so repulsed by her, sign a contract with Melkith. Open Bookworm and Danthman's Thoughts. Chapter 322, Return 1. Upon her return from the Red Tower, Sienna remained in Aroth for 3 more days. As the Archwizard had broken her long hibernation and returned to Aroth, she faced a flurry of tasks that required her attention. Within these few days, Sienna briefly delivered lectures on the arcane in both the Red and Green Towers, attended meetings with the Tower Masters, and even visited the Wizard Guild, where she gave a lecture. Just the previous day she had strolled through the city with the leading figures of the Aroth Council, the King and the Crown Prince, and interacted with the citizens. Her public appearances culminated in a casual speech she delivered at Meridian Square, which had been named after her. To tackle all these tasks in merely 3 days was quite the undertaking, yet Sienna managed them effortlessly, and these were only a fraction of her supposed duties. Being a legendary archwizard who had returned after centuries, she was Aroth's living catchphrase. Many coveted an audience with Sienna. The rich and influential desired even just a 10-minute conversation, while every wizard yearned to catch even a glimpse of her robes. Sienna was firm and stern as she dealt with these matters. Although she felt attached to Aroth, she had no intention of staying longer than necessary. What did the royal family and council say? Eugene asked her. They weren't happy, of course. Must you leave for the Lionheart family? They questioned, but why should I care about their opinions? Sienna responded with a chuckle. Of course, Aroth was loath to let Sienna leave. Even if she did not attend any events, merely having the wise Sienna in Aroth brought the kingdom tremendous benefits. In fact, they had seen an increased influx of tourists and wizards from other countries in recent days. Yet with the increase there were also those who left. I wish I could just obliterate that bleak tower, Sienna muttered. She was referring to the Black Tower of Magic. Droves of wizards belonging to the Black Tower had left Aroth after her return. According to Lovelian and Melkith, only about a third of the original number of wizards remained in the Black Tower. Moreover, Balzac Ludbeth, the Black Tower Master, had left the Samar Forest after dealing with Edmund Codrith, but he had yet to return. I can really tell how much time has passed when I'm looking at that grim tower. I did hear some whispers about raising a tower for black wizards before my seclusion, but most people in Aroth, including me, strongly opposed the idea, commented Sienna. I heard Helmuth made a large donation for Aroth to build the Black Tower, said Eugene. I felt this when I saw him in Babel, but I still can't understand what that blasted demon king of incarceration was thinking, Sienna said after a pause. While grumbling, Sienna hauled her luggage-filled carrier. She didn't need to pull the carrier herself. Everything could have been stored in her cape. But she insisted on the carrier, and the reason was simple. It made her heart flutter. It gave her the sense of leaving her longtime home in Aroth and moving to a new home. Can you even believe how Helmuth has, developed now? I've read books and watched videos about Helmuth, and it's entirely different from what I remember, said Sienna. I can assure you it's more surreal when you actually go there. Eugene empathized with Sienna's remark. The Helmuth he remembered from 300 years ago was a ruthless land, a withered place impossible for human habitation. It had been a place where everything was topsy-turvy. Even the weather had been unpredictable. It had been a land that sapped one's mental and physical strength just by dwelling in it. After a peace agreement concluded the war, the Demon King of Incarceration declared Helmuth as an empire and pronounced himself its emperor. Following this announcement, he unlocked the treasure stores of Babel and compensated the war-affected nations enormously. Until then, the continent had not acknowledged Helmuth as an empire, though the fear of the Demon King of Incarceration deterred them from openly rebelling. And not a single person had expressed the intent to emigrate to Helmuth until then. Yet, with a pace that could hardly be described as slow, Helmuth had truly transformed from a devildom into an empire. Creatures incapable of complex thoughts were made into something like livestock, and the Demon King of Incarceration himself reshaped the land and changed the sky. Countless demon folks became workers and laborers under the command of the Demon King. Siena's memory of Helmuth stopped at that point. What about now? In just 200 years, Helmuth had become the most habitable and developed empire on the continent. It enjoyed such a unique culture that it was truly baffling how it was achieved. And what's this Giabella Park? Siena mumbled, glancing at the newspaper on the stand. The front page of the arrayed newspapers featured news about Giabella Park in Helmuth. It's Noir Giabella's breeding ground, answered Eugene. It does look like that. That lunatic night demon always had a knack for crazy stuff, commented Siena. I fail to understand the mindset of people who visit this park for the sole purpose of recreation. Why on earth would they spend money and even donate life force in such a place? Anise chimed in as well. Eugene, Siena, Anise, and even Christina shared the same sentiment on this topic. Listening to the conversation from inside the cloak, Mare and Rhaenyra exchanged glances and sighed heavily. I wanted to visit at least once. Before we slay the Queen of Night Demons, or even after, we can still ride the attractions, can't we? After sharing their loathing for Noir Giabella, Eugene, Siena, and Christina moved to the warp gate at the Pentagon floating station. Siena wasn't keen on a noisy farewell, so she had sternly warned the royal family, council, and tower masters not to come for a send-off the day before. She had even threatened that if they came, she would make sure they would regret ever being born. Big sister. Malkuth would have surely heard those words. Yet she brazenly ignored Siena's warning and hid near the warp gate. Upon seeing Siena, she ran forth, crying out as if her heart was breaking. Take me with you too. Siena's expression twisted at the sight of Malkuth. Using a spell, she flung the charging Malkuth away and hastily grabbed her carry-on. Ignoring the screaming Malkuth, Eugene and Christina followed Siena into the warp gate. They had prearranged the meeting point to be devoid of people. This was a warp gate located in a quiet area, and their destination was already set. It was to Kiel's village, Bolagno, a place rural enough to provide fair competition to Eugene's hometown of Jadal. It was the current residence of the one who self-claimed to be the only dragon remaining awake, the red dragon Ariardel. They had a simple reason for visiting Ariardel before making the trip back to the Lionheart family. It would have been impossible to find Rhyzakia and rescue Siena without the help of Ariardel's draconic magic. Ariardel, having a deep resentment towards Rhyzakia, the traitor of their species, was entitled to know about Rhyzakia's death. In addition, they also wanted to ask about Rhaenyra. I haven't met any other dragon except for the black dragon, Rhaenyra peeked out from within the cloak and stated. Her face was taut with tension, visible to all. You surely don't mean, benefactor, you want to entrust me to a dragon I've never met before? That would be too cruel in my opinion, Christina chimed in, moving closer to Eugene and stroking Rhaenyra's head as she peeked out from inside Eugene's cloak. We can't just leave her clueless like this, countered Eugene. What did you just say? Benefactor. Even if you are this lady's benefactor, calling this lady a fool is too harsh, considering that this lady is a revered member of the great race. Rhaenyra retracted her head back into the cloak after a good smack on the red jewel. A dragon should have some dragon-like qualities. She's just clueless and weak, said Eugene. There couldn't be more than 100-year difference between Ariardel and Rhaenyra. Yet despite such a small age difference, the disparity between Ariardel and Rhaenyra was far too great. Despite being a magic-controlling dragon, Rhaenyra had no significant magic prowess, her dragon fear was mediocre, and her draconic lacked power. That's probably because of the ruby on her forehead, Siena speculated. She was still fixated on obtaining the red jewel on Rhaimyra's forehead. After researching the red jewel for several days, they discovered that the curse and binding of Rhyzakia still remained in the ruby despite his death. Rhyzakia had not treated his only kin as family. The crimson gemstone lodged within her was a safeguard, an anchor sunk deep into the core of her being. It ensured that she could never defy or resist him. Its oppressive presence was the reason for her lackluster magic, subpar dragon fear and inadequate draconic. The gem restrained the mighty dragon's powers that should reside within her. To meddle with that kind of magic, particularly that of a dragon, would be a burden even for me. And quite the nuisance. That Ariartel, despite just having surpassed her hatchling phase, should be able to intervene with her draconic. After all, Rhyzakia is dead, said Sienna. If she became more like a dragon, it was possible Rhaimyra could be utilized to their advantage in some capacity. But she's still just a fledgling after all, Sienna thought, keeping her expectations modest. To the ancient demons that had lived since the Age of Wars, even a dragon hatchling might be no more intimidating than a large lizard. Be benefactor, you can't abandon this lady. I do not wish to leave the warm embrace of my mother. Hopefully he would no longer have to deal with her usual frivolous antics with mare and muffled sobbing from inside the cloak once they resolved this issue. Hoping so, Eugene ignored Rhaimyra. They made their way through the quiet rural streets of Belanio to the vicinity of the home where Ariartel had chosen her solitude. Sienna's perception obscuring magic kept them from the villagers' prying eyes, but the gate to the property was already open. Ariartel could be seen at the window, her fiery red hair twisted around her fingers and a vexed expression on her face. Sienna and Ariartel's eyes met. Instantaneously, Ariartel's expression transformed. She took several steps back from the window with wide eyes that reflected disbelief. It seems she recognized you, commented Eugene. I've never seen that dragon before, answered Sienna. In this day and age, how many wizards with purple hair are wandering about? Do you know how many followed my trend and dyed their hair purple back in the day? There has been a trend among the priests since olden times to revere Lady Anise, and so they grew their blonde hair long, commented Christina. Then why is no one trying to copy me? Eugene asked in confusion. Who would deliberately scar their face to imitate you? And blow off one of their ears, no less. Eugene pouted at their response as he approached the house. The door opened without any prompt. The wise Sienna? Ariartel questioned, standing at the entrance. Do you not hear any news from Aroth in this rural place? Asked Eugene. What are you talking about? Ariartel asked, confused. Apparently you haven't. Sienna had returned to Aroth just a few days ago, but the rumor should have already spread across the continent. It seemed the news of Sienna's return had yet to reach Belanio, which was located on the outskirts of Kiel. I guess in this sense Jidal is better off. Eugene smiled nostalgically with appreciation for his hometown. Ariartel watched Eugene's smile with a sour expression before rearranging her face and turning back to Sienna. This powerful magic. It is certainly the wise Sienna herself. And you must be Christina Rogerus, the saint of our age? Asked Ariartel. It is an honor to meet a member of the great race, Christina replied with a radiant smile, her hands folded in prayer over her chest. Ariartel felt a slight shiver and took a step back. An arch-wizard who could be called a legend, the saint who could be called the embodiment of the light, and the reincarnation of a hero from 300 years ago. Although the three figures standing before her were unmistakably human, Ariartel couldn't possibly bring herself to regard them as such. This way, she said after a brief pause, swallowing nervously and turning. She had not anticipated visitors, but Ariartel felt no further annoyance towards them. She welcomed her three guests into the drawing room, willingly served tea and placed a cup before each of them. Wise Sienna, I heard about your misfortune from the stupid Hamel. Your presence before me in the world implies, as the stupid Hamel foretold, you have slain the black dragon Rhyzakia, the disgrace to dragonkind, said Ariartel. Stop saying stupid Hamel, Eugene was quick to correct her. Even Jagan, whom he had killed at the Dragon Demon Castle, had addressed him with the magnificent title of Hamel of Annihilation. So why did humans and dragons insist on referring to him as the stupid Hamel? Eugene found himself unfairly irritated with Sienna and Anise. Your name? Sienna asked. Ariartel. The red dragon Ariartel. Ah, so it's Ariartel. I've heard that you've been instrumental in my rescue. Sienna showed caution in her demeanor. She was conscious of the fact that she was dealing with a dragon. She gave a gentle bow toward the red dragon. If it hadn't been for your aid, it would have taken me an impossibly long time to return to the world. I, Sienna Meridian, a descendant of the Samar Forest's elven tribe and the World Tree, could awaken from my long slumber because of your help. Ah, a grand wizard, a pearl of magic both human and not. Lift your head. Though I am a dragon, I am but an immature being, certainly not greater than you. Please do not bow to me. Ariardle's expression was a mix of perplexity and joy. Even as a dragon, sitting face to face with figures she'd known only from ancient fairy tales was stirring. Hearing such words from the wise Sienna kindled the remnants of childhood innocence deep within her heart. Indeed, heroes from legends, from fairy tales should possess such dignity, she thought while stealing a glance at Eugene. Eugene Lionheart, the reincarnation of the stupid Hamel. He was boorish, brash, and lacked manners, much like how it was told in the fairy tale. But what about the wise Sienna? Behold her measured speech and sagacious gaze. And Christina Rogerus, the saint of their time. Each of her actions radiated a sanctity truly befitting her status and name. She seemed capable of embracing all beings in the world with compassion and love. Dragons usually hoard treasures in mountainous piles. While keeping her expression steady, Sienna surveyed the room with hawk-like eyes. The dwelling was too dilapidated to be perceived as a dragon's lair, as she had also observed from the outside before entering the house. Isn't there a single piece of treasure I can get my hands on? In this regard, Sienna and Eugene were quite similar. Sienna pondered how she might coax some treasures out of Ariardle. Chapter 323, Return 2. The story of how the demon dragon Raizakia met his end left Ariardle's expression rigid with shock. So, you're saying the two of you vanquished that demonic dragon? Ariardle found it hard to believe. Regardless of his weakened state, a dragon was still a dragon. Furthermore, Raizakia had been no ordinary dragon. Yet the two of them had slain it? Without an army? With a bit more luck, I could have killed it alone, said Eugene. Even if you'd managed to kill Raizakia by yourself, you'd have died in the aftermath, said Sienna. You don't know that. No. If I hadn't come to rescue you, you would have died alone, even without Raizakia having to lift a claw. Eugene could only pout, unable to find any words of rebuttal. Sienna's words held truth. Even if he had managed to hold a bit longer and destroy Raizakia's dragon heart, his physical body would have collapsed as a consequence of the strain. Ariardle's initial surprise ebbed as she watched their bickering. She composed her expression before speaking. For all the dragons in their long slumber, excluding me of course, we all wanted Raizakia's death. The demonic dragon was a disgrace to the dragons. Ariardle herself had desired to participate in Raizakia's extermination. However, as the guardian of the sleeping dragons, she couldn't risk joining a potentially dangerous battle. Thus she had allied with Eugene, the stupid Hamel. She had engraved the draconic spell onto the Akasha as requested, improved Akasha itself, and even loaned him Agarotha's ring. On behalf of all slumbering dragons, I, Ariardle the Red Dragon, bow to you heroes. Wise Sienna, stupid Hamel, thank you both for vanquishing the demon dragon Raizakia. Stop calling me stupid Hamel, Eugene muttered, his eyebrows furrowing. Sienna had remained silent until now. She swiftly raised her gaze to meet Ariardle's. May I make a request then? She asked. Wise Sienna, I consider myself greatly indebted to you. Feel free to ask anything of me, answered Ariardle. Sienna hadn't hoped for gratitude only in words. She took several breaths to gather her thoughts before launching into a detailed story. She spoke of the grievous wounds inflicted by Raizakia that had led to her being sealed for hundreds of years. During this time she had become weakened and incomplete. Even though she had miraculously been released from her seal following the vanquishing of Raizakia, her wounds were far from fully healed. She spoke of the world's fragile peace, the prophecy of the demon king of incarceration, and the story of the demon king of destruction, who had driven countless dragons to death during the era of war. Ariardle's face darkened progressively with each grim, grave, and urgent tale. Even from her perspective, this era's situation and future were bleak and despairing. Even though they'd felled the demon dragon Raizakia, The other dukes of Helmuth were on a different level altogether. They had grown stronger and more formidable over the centuries. Observing the world from the towering Babel, the demon king of incarceration was dispensing peace like divine grace. Moreover, even though he had been silent in his own domain of Revesta for centuries, there was an unsettling uncertainty about when the demon king of destruction might suddenly stir. In contrast, the adversaries were still quite feeble. Apart from Ariartel, all the other dragons lay sleeping. Ariartel, though proud of her draconic heritage, didn't overestimate her strength. The pride and power of her magnificent race had already been brutally crushed 300 years ago. Gathering dozens of dragons would still not be enough to oppose the demon kings, particularly the demon king of incarceration and destruction. The two demon kings had been the primary perpetrator of the dragon massacre. Ariartel was still young and inexperienced in battle. The red dragon had realized very early that she could not be a worthy adversary to the demon kings in this era. "The favor I wish to ask of you is," Sienna paused, noting the shadow that crossed Ariartel's face. Her words were verbose, but the gist was straightforward. Did Ariartel have any remaining dragon hearts? Ariartel hesitated, lips moving soundlessly. Why did they need a dragon heart? Why was Sienna asking for one? The red dragon had heard the reasons. Though Raizakia's wounds were no longer visible, scars remained in the astute Sienna's soul. Healing those wounds and fighting against the demon race and the demon kings in the future required the power of a dragon heart. Yes, Ariartel understood that and hadn't thought to question Sienna's motives. If the request had come from the stupid Hamel, the red dragon might have hesitated more. But the why Sienna asked directly meant the need was indeed dire. After a moment's pause, Ariartel nodded. "If it's truly a desperate need, wise Sienna, I can spare a dragon heart." Really? Sienna's excitement was understandable. "But, well, no, I should not hesitate. This is all for the sake of the world." Ariartel shook her head a few times before raising her hand high. With a loud crack, the air warped slightly, and a dragon heart pulsing with red light fell from the gap. "This is," Sienna muttered. Ariartel placed the object, which was slightly larger than her head, onto her palm and gave a sad smile. The dragon heart on her palm vibrated and emitted light before shrinking to the size of a fist. "It's my mother's dragon heart. She barely survived the battle with destruction and incarceration but could not fully recover from her wounds and passed away centuries ago. This dragon heart is the keepsake she left me," said Ariartel. I believe it would be better for the world if the wise Sienna uses it for a righteous cause rather than me holding on to it. Thus I will transfer this dragon heart to you. I hope that it can restore some of your strength and heal the wound inflicted by the traitor of our race, Raizakia," continued Ariartel. Although it was a lie that the wound from Raizakia remained, it was too late to deny it now, wasn't it? Even so, Sienna felt sincere gratitude as she bowed her head. "Indeed, Ariartel. What we failed to accomplish 3 centuries ago, we shall achieve this time around. Your support, or rather the support of the dragons, will not be forgotten." Sienna gently accepted the dragon heart. It was impossible to implant the dragon heart into Frosthear, so for now she tucked it into her cloak. Having handed over the dragon heart, Ariartel seemed somewhat relieved and satisfied. Yet their business was not quite finished. Eugene studied Ariartel's expression while she surreptitiously grasped the hem of her cloak. "Are you not going to inquire about Raizakia's hatchling?" he asked. "She must have perished, no?" Ariartel responded with a look of puzzlement. Surely the demon dragon's hatchling would also have been a demonic dragon. It would have definitely perished at the hands of the stupid Hamel. She hadn't even considered questioning it. "Come out," said Eugene. I refuse." "I said come out." Eugene reached into his cloak and seized Rhaimyra's horn. Ariartel's eyes widened at the sight of Rhaimyra being drawn from the cloak. The demon dragon's hatchling. Shock quickly turned to enmity. Ariartel stood up abruptly and unleashed a fierce wave of dragon fear. "So this is it, stupid Hamel. You've been considerate enough to spare me the task of punishing this hatchling myself. Good. Imposing the sins of the father onto the child may be cruel, but it is my duty as a dragon to burn the seed that will one day become the demon dragon." "She's just a dragon," Eugene interrupted. "What did you say?" asked Ariartel. "A bit simple and stupid, yes. But still. No, besides that, I told you before. Stop unleashing your dragon fear like that. It scares the little one, shouted Eugene. As Eugene scolded her, he comforted the shivering mare in his cloak. At his angry words, Ariardel recoiled while Rhaenyra glared resentfully at Eugene. Benefactor, why do you discriminate like this between mare and this lady? Asked Rhaenyra. What discrimination? Is it not? You comfort and worry about mare when she's scared, yet you dismiss this lady's fears and drag me out. Rhaenyra accused. All of this is for your own good. It's all to help you. Eugene gently stroked Rhaenyra's head a few times, feeling a bit guilty at her accusation. Christina, who had been silently watching this exchange, had a fervent conversation with a niece in her mind. See, sister, Sir Eugene is indeed kind. Even if you consider their actual ages, Rhaenyra is at least 5 times older than Hamel, but that's not important. The fact that Rhaenyra acts like a child makes it easier for us to show her maternal affection and to restrain Mare. It feels like we're practicing for parenthood. Anise was caught off guard by Christina's thoughts. Christina watched the interaction between Rhaenyra and Eugene with a fond gaze, no more words spilling from her lips. A vivid image of a bustling family life took shape in her mind, extending even to a future where Rhaenyra acted as an older sister or aunt to her own yet unborn child. Not a demonic dragon. It took Ariardel a moment to compose her emotions and scrutinize Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra shrank back and avoided eye contact, unable to meet Ariardel's gaze. She is indeed a spawn of Rhysakia, but she hasn't fallen like him. Though she isn't exactly unscathed either, explained Eugene. That crimson gem in her head. It's a fragment of a dragon heart, said Ariardel, narrowing her eyes and studying Rhaenyra. Despite her eccentricity, Ariardel was still a true dragon. She recognized the powerful constraint imposed on Rhaenyra by the gem, a magic seal placed by Draconic. Do you wish for me to remove this seal? Asked Ariardel. If it is within your power. Humph. Do not test me, stupid Hamel. While the seal is potent, Rhysakia is dead. My Draconic can indeed interfere with it, Ariardel said before looking at Eugene. However, I must be cautious with this. Stupid Hamel, do you seek to release the seal on this hatchling to control her? Or to free her? What kind of answer do you desire? Asked Eugene. She has not fallen like her father. This hatchling is a dragon. She has no obligation to atone for her father's sins. I believe as a fellow dragon I must guarantee her freedom, answered Ariardel. This lady is already sufficiently free. Rhaenyra jumped into the conversation before Eugene could say anything. In that short moment she had thought about what would become of her. From what she gathered, the stern-looking red dragon seemed to be on her side, advocating for her as fellow kin. But freedom? Where exactly? Here in this rundown house in the countryside with the smell of animal dung, alone with this red dragon? Or perhaps living in a cave deep in a mountain surrounded only by flora and fauna, just like in numerous legends and fairy tales. Was that the freedom this red dragon advocates for? I refuse. The mere thought of it was horrifying. Rhaenyra had spent 200 years imprisoned in the secluded palace of the demon dragon castle. Regardless of this, Rhaenyra was very much aware of her identity as a dragon. Even as a young hatchling, she knew how tempting a prey she was to greedy humans and other races. Eugene Lionheart was strong. Rhaenyra had seen the evidence of Eugene's strength many times. She had seen him crush the terrifying beast-folk monster, making a fool out of the staff of incarceration and even overpowering the demon dragon, if only for a brief moment. That wasn't all either. She enjoyed a sense of safety and more by Eugene's side. Being cared for by the saint with the dual personality was comforting, and she had to admit that even bickering with Mare over trivial conversations was fun. She would be safe inside Eugene's cloak and she would never be in any danger. Rhaenyra had heard tales of the Dukes of Helmuth and the Demon Kings, but if she really thought about it, aside from 2 dukes and 2 demon kings, who else posed a threat to Eugene Lionheart? She found her own conclusion to be profoundly illuminating. In truth, should this lady venture alone, I must remain vigilant of hundreds, thousands of foes. But with benefactor Eugene by her side, who exists as a threat, save for the dukes and demon kings. What of the demon king's army? She had not considered it. Instead, Rhaenyra reveled in the brilliance of her own deduction. This lady. This lady will continue traveling with Benefactor even after the restrictions placed on me are gone. Eugene felt a stir of emotion upon hearing her response. Who could have expected such brave words? Discrimination against Mare? That was unavoidable. Yet it spurred in him a resolve to treat Rhaenyra slightly better in the future. Scion of the demonic dragon. No, descendant of the black dragon. I, Ariartel the red dragon, will respect your will. With those words, Ariartel approached Rhaenyra. In a moment of flurry, Rhaenyra attempted to retreat, but Ariartel reached out and grasped her shoulder. Ugh. Ariartel's face drew near Rhaenyra's forehead toward the embedded red jewel. She examined the red jewel with wide, intent eyes. This is dreadful. Truly dreadful. Rhysakia, how could that lunatic view dragons, his own kin, in such a way? The constraint suppressed so many aspects of her growth. In fact, Rhaenyra would never become a dragon of merit even in centuries under the constraint. Rhysakia had desired this. He wanted neither a splendid daughter nor a proper dragon from Rhaenyra. Instead, he had wished for an existence he could control and play with, lay eggs with, and then ultimately consume. Ariartel did not discern his true horrific intentions but still felt genuine sympathy for Rhaenyra's restriction. We shall begin now, Ariartel said after observing the red gem. How long will it take? Asked Eugene. We will only know once it is completed. But even at the earliest it will take at least 4 days, answered Ariartel. I will come back to fetch you then, Eugene told Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra looked at Eugene, startled by his response. Are you leaving me here alone? What can we do even if we stay? We'll come back later, so behave well. Don't cry out of loneliness without me, Mare added her piece, sticking her head out of the cloak. Rhaenyra gazed at Christina with trembling eyes. Her look tugged at Christina's heartstrings, but still she had no intention of separating from Eugene to stay there. What if Sienna crossed a daring line in her absence? Christina and Anise were determined to prevent such an event at all costs. Thus, Rhaenyra ended up staying in that house for several days. The desperate cries of "Benefactor, Benefactor" echoed from the door as it closed, but Eugene did not even give a second glance. Time to finally make our return, murmured Eugene with his back against the weathered house. Their destination was the capital of Kiel, Ceres, where the Lionheart's main estate was located. Cyan, who had returned first, must have explained the circumstances somewhat, but... He glanced at Sienna, her smile beaming by his side. How should he explain returning with the wise Sienna? What words would convince Patriarch Gilead and Scylla and the rest of the household? Speaking of which, Eugene, your biological father, he's still alive, isn't he? Asked Sienna. Yes. Then on this visit I should greet your father, shouldn't I? She said, her voice quickening. She twisted a lock of her hair nervously as she continued. I should bring a gift or... Lord Gerhard enjoys fine food and drink, Christina interjected casually. Of course, I have met him in advance. We even shared a meal together before. There was no taunting tone in her voice. Still, her unmistakable display of familiarity caused Sienna's eyes to quiver. I'll go ahead. Eugene had no desire to be caught in the crossfire of whatever was igniting between them. With a deep sigh, he quickly hurried his steps as if fleeing the scene.